and welcome everyone. My name is Kendra Peavy and I'm a co-founder of the US-Canada B Corp Marketers Network, along with today's moderator, Tim Frick. And we're sponsoring today's event. What can your business do about plastic pollution? Today we have Andrea Densham, Senior Policy Advisor at Densham Consulting, Joel Brameyer, President and CEO of the Alliance for the Great Lakes, and Kate Jacobus, who is co-founder of Meliora Cleaning Products. They'll be sharing their insights and experience around reducing plastic pollution through the lens of policy advocacy and business innovation. But before we dive in, we'd love to help share a little bit of information in case you're not familiar with the US-Canada B Corp Marketers Network, which is a professional network within the B Corp community. As a professional network, our purpose is to increase a sense of community, collaboration, and partnerships between US and Canada-based B Corp marketers, amplify and educate consumers and business about the unique value of B Corp certification, share best practices, tools, and expertise like we are today that allow purpose-driven marketers to succeed and prove the ROI of their work, and emphasize and adhere to ethical marketing best practices, which is the collective impact that we hope to create with today's Lunch and Learn. So if you'd like to learn more about the B Corp certification, please visit bcorporation.net. Or if you're already a part of the B Corp community and would like to learn more about the US-Canada Marketers Network, join and follow our group on the Beehive. We'll send some links at the end of this session to make it easy to access. With that said, I'm going to pass it back to Tim to kick off the conversation with today's guest. Tim, Take it away.
Thanks so much, Kendra. Really appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Really appreciate you all being here. I was very excited to get this wonderful group of speakers together. So we're going to be covering today, by the way, welcome Q&A presentation, what's next. But, you know, most importantly, we're going to be having this really great group of people having a wonderful discussion about the crisis of plastic pollution. I got the opportunity to see Andrea give a presentation on this topic, and I'm going to call on her first. The really compelling statistics and information around just how big the plastic pollution problem really is. Before we do that, though, I want to ask you if you wouldn't mind, Andrea, just giving a brief introduction of yourself.
Absolutely. Hi, Andrea Densham. I'm the principal and senior advisor for Densham Consulting. And importantly for this discussion, I've had the honor to be able to work with colleagues across the country and binationally, and even some colleagues globally on how we solve and move forward with plastic pollution. How do we address the issue? How do we identify the challenges? But most importantly, how do we make impactful policy solutions and work with our partners, like all of you here, in the business community to try to move the ball down the field in a sustainable and long-term way.
Great, thanks, Andrea. Kate Jacobus, thank you so much for joining us. Meliora Cleaning Products, her company, is one of the earliest B Corps in Illinois, and we've been excited to be partners on all kinds of different things. Kate, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Kate Jacobus. I founded Meliora Cleaning Products almost 10 years ago here in Chicago, and we manufacture and develop people and planet-friendly cleaners. So anything you might use to clean your house, think laundry detergent, stain removers, all-purpose cleaner. And since the beginning, we've been an ingredient-first company, but almost immediately, you can't really become an ingredient-first company without also looking at your packaging and CPG. So we are really dually focused on the ingredients in the products we make, as well as how they're packaged and delivered, and making those as minimally impactful as possible to people and the planet. And I'm really happy to be here today and talk about that.
Thanks, Kate. Joel, would you mind introducing yourself and the work that you do at the Alliance for the Great Lakes?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Brameyer. I am president of the Alliance for the Great Lakes. We are an ENGO. I'm located in Chicago, Illinois, but we have staff and presence across the U.S. Great Lakes region. We are an environmental advocacy group working primarily on water policy at the federal, state, and local levels. We also work with an army of volunteers around the Great Lakes region that I'll talk about in a minute. And one of the big issues that we deal with is the issue of plastic pollution getting into our freshwater. So I'll talk more about that in a little bit. We also have enjoyed the support and partnership of a number of B Corps over the years, including Tim's. And so we're really glad to be here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Joel. So Andrea, I would love if you wouldn't mind setting the stage for us and kind of walking us through why plastic pollution is such a big issue, what are the ramifications of it and on health and the environment and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to bounce right into your first slide and hand it over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. It's an honor to be here today, and I can't wait for us to engage in a great conversation about this. For many of you, you're here today because you're concerned. You've heard what many of us have been talking about for a number of years, which is the concern for plastic and forever chemicals on not only environment, but on us, on our human health as well. So, what we know right now is that plastic and forever chemicals are harm and can cause long-term harm, not only to humans, but also the wildlife and to our drinking water. The good news is that there are solutions that we can move upstream. We can reduce pollution at the source. And we can make sure that we're addressing the potential really negative and real impacts of plastic on the existential crisis of climate change and our climate crisis. And in the next slide. So what's been happening over the last 10 years or so is an increasing amount of really high quality peer-reviewed research, which is telling us that not only is the pollution increasing, but the impacts on human health are increasingly concerning. And in this article, and there are many, many others, notes the importance not only to marine species, but all the way through the food chain to those of us as consumers and our families. The more research there is, the better we understand the problem. But we can move to the next slide. The problem has been framed in the past, really focusing on the consumer, and to cleaning up after the pollution's already occurred. I really encourage us to reframe that problem, to look upstream, to identify how we can find solutions at the source and prevent the problem before it starts. And I'm going to say three really quick statistics here, just to help you all have a sense. Single-use plastic, such as disposable packaging, wrappers, account for 40% of plastic production every year. So 40% of plastic produced each year come from disposable packaging and wrappers and items like that. More than 18 million microplastics are released through just one load of laundry. So clearly the plastics are in many things, including our clothes. And half of plastics made half of all plastics made in the existence of plastics have been made in the last 20 years. So this is a new problem, and we can solve it right now. So design decisions are where the money is, and you all can help with this, right? How a product is manufactured and designed, whether or not there are toxic chemicals, how much oil and gas is used. That's a place where we have the greatest challenge, and we can make the biggest impact. There is disproportionate harm. For those who live and work closest to the production site, they are harmed the most. And I think that environmental justice issue is one that's often under talked about. I also really encourage us to reframe this problem as a public health and climate crisis issue. The production of plastic and other packaging includes toxic additives. We use petroleum and natural gas in that in the production, and that pollutes the air and the water. Not only does it contribute to climate change, but it damages the health of people that live near it and all of us. Next slide. Like I said, there are solutions, and I really encourage all of us to reframe the solutions as well. My dear colleagues at Monterey Bay Aquarium were part of this National Academies of Science report that came out at the end of last year, that really urges the United States generally to take action. Our colleagues in Canada have already taken action. They've already banned single-use plastics in Canada, and Ontario really taking a lead in that. So we can move towards preventing the harm from happening and advancing towards sustainable solutions. And you in the B Corp community, I think, are at the front of that, right? Making smart investments, saves resources and money, it improves health, and it increases investments in Great Lakes and coastal resiliency. And I know many of my friends, our friends here on this call, are also in the middle of the country. It also makes a huge impact on rivers and streams and just the local health in your communities and towns. The last piece I want to highlight is, and Joel can speak more to this, but many of us have worked really hard in the policy space to clean up past harms. Pollution that's happened in the past. In fact, $1 billion in the infrastructure bill was dedicated to cleanups here in the Great Lakes. It'd be great to take that $1 billion and focus on prevention, restoration, and building a resilient future. It's time to move in that direction. Next slide. So the other thing that you all can help with is purchasing. Procurement. Just last year, I was part of an effort to try to move the federal government in that direction, and we saw success. The Department of Interior is moving to reducing the amount of plastic, single-use plastic they're purchasing. You all can be leaders in this. It's a really important effort moving towards reuse, decreasing single-use plastic, all something that you can do not only within your own businesses, but you can urge your local cities and towns to do that. Next slide. And here are some really quick, and we can go into these in more detail, but on the policy side, which is my bread and butter every day, at the state level, we're working on extended producer responsibility and source reduction bills. We're working on reducing the worst of the worst. Like here in Illinois, we're going to try to ban polystyrene and foam. Procurement, we're working to help the state government make smart purchasing decisions and moving away from single-use plastic, just like the Department of Interior in the United States have done. Moving towards smart container bills. I'm a very proud Michigander, and we have had for a long time, most of my life, a 10-cent bottle bill, and it works well, I promise you. At the regional and federal levels, and this includes binationally, we can have interstate compacts. We need to collect more information. Knowledge is power, and the more knowledge we have, the smarter decisions we can make. And as someone who lives and works in the Great Lakes, we have a Great Lakes Compact between us here in the Great Lakes and our colleagues on the other side of the border. We could identify microplastics and other toxins as part of Annex 3 in the chemical mutual concern. We can prevent that. We can work together to find new solutions. And lastly, just want to really highlight how important sustainable solutions are. I'm a Michigander and from Ann Arbor. This little reusable cup is from my local roaster that I actually buy coffee with and send it here to Chicago because they're such good and amazing producers. This is an amazing way to move us away from single use, right? There are lots of smart solutions to things like that. We just need to remember that as we move forward, to move towards building sustainable solutions, investing in prevention, and reducing pollution. If we do that, we can keep clean water. We can make sure that our drinking water, my water comes from Lake Michigan, which is just down the street. We can improve public health, and we can prevent the worst of the worst. So look forward to talking with all of you and working with you to find a even more sustainable future than we already have.
Thanks so much for Andrea. Really appreciate that. Really great information to set the tone here for this conversation. Next, I'm going to pass it over to Joel to talk a little bit about the work of the Alliance for the Great Lakes and basically pass the baton. So go ahead, Joel, and tell us about what you're working on.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. And I'm looking at the chat too and seeing some of the success stories being talked about there. And that's really cool and inspiring. And I'm just noting the success from Costa Rica. It reminds me too of like policies can work. So in Chicago, where I live, there were multiple attempts to figure out how to do a plastic bag ban. And eventually they got it right with a financial incentive, and it actually resulted in at least a 30% reduction over time, and it might actually be more in consumption of those single-use plastic bags, and so that was really good news. As I said in my intro, I run an environmental advocacy organization called the Alliance for the Great Lakes, and I'm really privileged to work in a part of the country in the US and Canada. This is a binational resource where so many people are fully bought into the idea of clean water as a value that is really shared across, that urban-rural divide, across political divides. People don't always talk about it in the same way, but at the bottom line is this water does connect us all. And it's just a tremendous, unique resource. Tim, you can go to the next slide. I wanted to give a little bit of a sense of the scale of this place that we work in, and I know some of the folks on this call are from the Midwest and others are not. So the Great Lakes are a massive surface freshwater system, and they span about 1,000 miles from west to east. More than 40 million people in the United States and Canada draw their drinking water from the Great Lakes. The volume of water is staggering. It's about 20% of the fresh surface water in the world, bounded by a relatively small number of people. But the people that depend on that water every day are very clued in to how different pollutants affect it, right? And so plastics over the last decade have become a real sort of visible pollution issue for the people of the Great Lakes region, because people are very sensitive to anything that shows up in their anything visible that shows up in their water as a pollutant. There are, it's estimated now, about 22 million pounds of plastic entering the Great Lakes every year. That was an estimate that was created about 5 years ago by the Rochester Institute of Technology in New York. 22 million pounds every year. And as Andrea talked about a bit in her comments, it's coming from all sorts of places. There isn't one single source, even from our laundry. And so when Great Lakers heard about this problem and really started cluing into it over the last decade, there have been just massive calls for action being taken, and things like plastic bag bans and other bans. And where is this problem coming from? So there's a deep opportunity here for a lot of public education and a lot of smart choices about what we do to actually get a handle on this problem, which admittedly is a global one. It's not exclusive to the Great Lakes. So Tim, why don't you go to the next slide?
Sure.
All right, so this is just one of many images that we have of plastic in the Great Lakes. This is washed up after a storm. In practice, most of the plastic in the Great Lakes is actually tiny particles, what we call these microplastics, which are particles of 5 millimeters or smaller, even down to microscopic size. At the Alliance for the Great Lakes, we have a program called our Adopt a Beach program, which gets out and cleans up debris off of the shoreline and out of the water every year. We activate anywhere between 10 and 15,000 volunteers annually in this program. It's great. Lots of communities participate in it. And people get really frustrated because they're cleaning up plastic that's already out there. About 85% of what we find in the water and on the beaches is actually plastic. So to give you a sense of that scale, I mentioned that 22 million pounds going into the water annually. Over the last 20 years, we estimate we've picked up about 500,000 pounds of debris, most of which has been plastic, right? So it gives you, there's this just difference in scale of what's being put into our water versus what we're actually able to take out. And so the bottom line here is not that cleanups are bad or that recycling is bad. It's that those actions are not sufficient to actually solve the problem. They're really important to demonstrate what's out there, to identify sources of the problem, but they're not going to be sufficient. And that's where the work that you all do as business leaders and producers and manufacturers and suppliers come in, because that's where the rubber's going to meet the road to actually reduce the amount of plastic in the environment. I wanted to share a little bit about one experience that was really important for the Great Lakes that I think illustrates kind of where we've been and where we need to go. In about 2012, researchers in New York started to go out and find tiny particles of microplastics in the water. And a large amount of what they were finding, about 20% of the samples, were these things that called microbeads. So little microbeads, which a lot of you are no doubt familiar with, were these beads that were actually included mainly in cosmetic products and some pharmaceuticals, tiny particles of plastic. And very quickly, the Great Lakes states, they saw this stuff showing up in the water and they started passing bans on microbeads and started putting pressure on the federal government to ban microbeads. And it turns out that because microbeads were sort of seen as an inessential item and they didn't really serve a purpose that couldn't be served by another alternative, banning them was relatively easy. And in 2015, the United States Congress actually banned microbeads, and now with some limited exceptions where they're actually needed in a medical product, they're not allowed to be put into cosmetics anymore. So that knocks out a big source of plastic pollution. But that was that was a unusual situation where a single product type could actually be eliminated, and it had a big impact on the overall plastic waste stream. Where we are now is that we can't go product by product and eliminate, whether it's plastic bags or drinking straws or whatever it is. We really got to get closer to, as Andrea started getting to, the design and the sources of the plastics. And so when we talk about single-use plastics, that covers a whole range of items that people might consume in their daily lives. So we're not going to solve this problem just by knocking out, one bad item. The drinking straw is what became the next cause celeb when it came to plastic reduction. We're going to have to move past that kind of thinking and get into the systems of how plastic is actually produced and consumed. And that's where we've got to move to source reduction. And so I know we're going to get into this a bit more, and there's a great example of that coming up here. But we focus now a lot on, we're stepping more into the policy world of plastics through the lens of how can we actually get overall reductions in the amount of plastic produced in the first place, whether it's a container, whether it's a textile, whether it's a fork. And that's where we get into policies like the ones we're gonna dig into here, work with California, where we started to see actual bans on styrofoam as a category, and plastic reduction targets that must be met by manufacturers, which we're really excited about. And looking forward to doing more work to bring those approaches to the Great Lakes states, and certainly to the rest of the country, as our consciousness about the scale of this problem starts to evolve. I'm going to stop there and turn things back over to you, Tim, and you can introduce our next speaker.
Great. Thanks, Joel. Really appreciate all of that. Really wonderful information. Kate, I think you're such a perfect example to kind of finish out this conversation here, given that you've done such amazing things with Meliora. So talk to us a little bit about what Meliora is and how you've done what you've done to address this issue in your own operations.
Terrific. Thanks, Tim, and thanks for that amazing setup, Andrea and Joel. So the great news about being a business and especially about being a consumer product business, a CPG company, is we have a chance not to just highlight these issues and point out some of the problems, but to offer solutions that are available to get people and hopefully encourage people to take action today. And I think it really goes hand in hand. We need changes in regulations. We need nonprofits working on these issues. We need people highlighting, the studies of what's going wrong. And then we need businesses to be able to offer products so that when consumers do get that motivation, something's there they can reach out to go ahead and make some progress on that issue. So Meliora was founded with the idea of reducing the toxins in our everyday cleaning products. And that includes both, the ingredients of cleaning products, which was really the founding story of Meliora, was about the ingredients. But the packaging is so central to any consumer packaged good and goes hand in hand with ingredients. You can't sell a wonderfully non-toxic consumer product and then wrap it in toxic plastic and then feel good about what you're doing. So Meliora was founded in 2013, and we have been offering products that are low and no plastic since we started. And when you think about a cleaning product, I think a lot of people automatically think liquids, right? You're thinking like a drippy gel laundry detergent, or you're thinking like a liquid spray cleaner or something like that. And if we're talking about plastic, we've all been talking about going back to the source, right? Let's turn off the plastic at the tap. For a consumer product, that source is at the design phase. And so at Meliora, we designed out all of the water in our products. So nothing we sell is in liquid format currently when we sell it. We sell powders, that's our laundry detergent. We sell tablets that you mix at home to make your liquid cleaner. And that's how we have designed out a lot of the single-use plastic. So we have zero single-use plastic anywhere in our product line. We use a lot of cardboard. We use a lot of steel and paper to package the solids, the bars, and the powders of our products. We use some glass. We have some multi-use plastic in the forms of like the trigger sprayers, the sprayers for our all-purpose cleaner, meant to be used over and over and over for years. So we've really taken, that plastic is a design problem. Waste is a design problem. So we've gone back to the source and really taken that out of the product. And as a result, to this day, if we just can go to the next slide, we have saved over 2 million bottles from entering the supply chain. And, recycling is important. We can, I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but the further back we go into the supply chain, the easier it is to reduce the problem. That, we really need to cut off the problem at the source. Andrea mentioned the Monterey Bay Aquarium report, and there's a really beautiful illustration in there that I wish I could find. I'm gonna have to try and dig it up, that shows the entire life cycle of plastic, right? So it's extracting it out of the ground. Plastics are a fossil fuels problem. It's manufacturing it into plastic packaging that has environmental justice issues on the communities surrounding these facilities. It's the use case. So where a lot of the CPG impact, a lot of people start to engage with the product is just at the use case. And we are seeing more and more people realizing that even just using the plastic, even if you forget about the extraction step and the manufacturing step, and just when plastic enters your home, we're seeing more and more people start to understand that there's a concern due to the toxic chemicals that are blended to make the plastic, that can be a concern for them. So the people that are worried about the ingredients in their home, and that's a lot of our customers, people that are looking for healthier products, are starting to understand that using plastic packaged products is not great. So you can't just have a great ingredient and then use the plastic along with it. And so yeah, the 2 million plastic bottles is coming from completely designing out the plastic packaging from our product in almost every case. We try to think of ourselves, we're almost 10-year-old company, so we are growing and we are a robust, profitable company. So if you look at us on paper, we are a great CPG company, but we're also, if you look at us another way, really just an environmental case study and how we can do better. So looking at how can we support the refill movement and the recircular movement. One of the things that we work with is refilleries. So you can find Meliora in a lot of refill stores where you would go and bring in your own packaging and add, go to pick up your laundry detergent that way. And so it's a zero packaging option. One of the unique things that has made us the go-to brand for refilleries is that we take back the store level packaging. So most stores that sell bulk items will have to get, bulk containers and then throw out those bulk containers. So at the consumer level, you're reducing or eliminating packaging, but at the store level, you still have all this trash. So we've actually implemented a take back program at the store level to ship 5-gallon buckets of products and then get those back. And then they get washed and reused and go back to the stores. So really looking at the whole value chain of where that product comes. I call it like the Cotton Eye Joe problem. Where does it come from? Where does it go? So that's the official earworm of supply chain. And with plastic, there's no good answers. It doesn't come from anywhere good. It doesn't go anywhere good. So just trying to opt out of that wherever we can in the supply chain is what we try and do. After we try and reduce as much as we can, I think the next slide shows, the rest of it, which is, we do try and look at where does it go? Can we recycle things when possible? There's some limited plastic film recycling available. There's a compost bucket that's actually made from one of our retired bulk buckets that I think has like a hole in it or got used for compost accidentally or something like that. So, we sort a lot of our trash internally, and we're very, proud of those efforts, but ultimately our bigger impact is going further up the supply chain and creating and delivering products that help people reduce their plastic as well. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges with this. Recycling and plastic pollution in general is a bit of an intractable problem because a lot of times we can't even really agree on definitions. The issues of compostable plastic, bioplastic, do we consider these plastics? Are they better than traditional or are they worse? So those are some issues that we're certainly seeing. We definitely see some dissolvable plastics entering the market where rather than trying to contain, solid pieces of plastic that we know we can break down, people are now intentionally adding a dissolved plastic to the wastewater. So really, intentionally releasing these types of plastic into the environment. So those are some of the problems that we're working on and trying to eliminate those from the supply chain. Awesome.
Thank you, Kate. I really appreciate it. There was one more of your compost bucket here too. Thanks so much. So at that point, thanks to all three of you for kind of walking us through the various components of this issue and the problems of this issue. What I want to do now is encourage anybody that's listening to add questions in the chat. Kendra's going to monitor those. Kendra and Becca are going to take a look at those. In the meantime, I'm going to seed the Q&A with a question about if a company is just kind of getting started on this plastic pollution journey, what should they do first? What should be the low-hanging fruit that they think about as if they're wanting to move forward?
I think I'll just jump in, and obviously for some of the other panelists, a lot of times we want to look at where our biggest impact is. You know, there's always low-hanging fruit. If you're not recycling in your building, you know, look into that. But I think if you look at where your biggest impact is, that's going to tell you where your efforts should, you know, your 80-20, where should 80% of your time be spent? And that should be where your company has the biggest impact. So if you're a consulting company, you know, maybe you're looking at the travel that you're looking at, then that's the case for kind of sustainability in general. So from a plastic perspective, what does your company do? So where do you have the availability to make the biggest impact? When we first started Meliora, we had, you know, we would have goals every year in people and profit and planet. And our planet was, it was a lot about our internal recycling goals. And a few years ago, we realized that really wasn't the right thing. That's not where Meliora has our biggest impact. And so we changed our goals to look at changing our packaging to have more single material packaging, for example, to make it more recyclable. So trying to figure out, you know, where you have the biggest influence overall.
Joel, thanks for raising your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, kind of building on that too, that point about where can you have the most impact as a charity, and one that does that part of our programming is volunteer stewardship. That kind of work is very attractive to businesses that want to support environmental initiatives, right? And so we have lots of business sponsors, small and large, who support us, want us to do employee engagement, and sometimes go as far as saying, we'd like to, you know, put your name on our stuff, you know, and then show that we're supporting your work. Well, that's happened more and more lately with this issue of plastic, because companies are starting to pursue, you know, plastic reduction using things like refills. And I think I won't name anybody, but I'm thinking of, you know, a couple of examples where we've gotten these kinds of proposals for support and a desire to sort of market that support. And we've gone back and said, hey, like, we'll talk to you, but you really need to be clear with us about how this is going to result in an actual measurable plastic reduction over time. And there's an accountability here when a business wants to partner with us and wants to start talking about, and wants to do so through that lens of, hey, we're doing something good for the environment, we're doing something to reduce the amount of plastic that we're selling. We have to ask the question back. Well, tell us how you know that's going to be true. How, you know, show us the numbers, and perhaps have a deeper conversation than what you were initially thinking. That's what we've experienced in that space.
Sure. Yeah. And that's a conversation that we have over and over in this group. We many of the webinars that we produce and the conversations that we have are talking specifically about that particular issue. Andrea.
You know, I work in the policy space every day, and obviously source reduction is critically important. There are a number of different solutions, but one that really interfaces well with your work is around the procurement and purchasing. One of the challenges I've had in the last years talking with federal government representatives and recently with some state representatives is for them to hear from companies like you and how the solutions have been made. They often think like it's an impossible thing for them to move away from single-use plastic, right? They need to hear directly from business owners that it's not impossible. Not only are you making products that they can purchase, but you are pushing the supply chain as well. And they need to understand that they can help you as small businesses in their states and their towns and their cities, that them making those decisions actually help you all with costs and actually reduce the costs on your local municipality by not having waste that has nowhere to go, right? So there's some cost decisions there where you as business owners are heard, frankly, really differently than me and my black suit on as the policy wonk that they hear from all the time. They really would love to hear your content expertise.
And Andrea, that leads into one of the questions that Becca actually presented. She said that often she is hearing from smaller B Corps that they don't know how to get affordable, sustainable options when they're the only ones asking for it. So what I was hearing you say is letting policymakers hear the success. What can small businesses do direct with suppliers?
Yeah, that's right. And I think, Kate is such a great example of how nicely that's done, right? Like hearing that this is possible. You can make this change, and consumers like me want to buy it, right? And big entities like a state or a federal government or even your local town, when they make that change, it helps with reducing costs by changing supply chain. And I think that order of magnitude issue is often missed, and you all have a really important leadership role, but you can tell that story both through elected officials and to your customers and to fellow B Corps. Like there's a sort of three-dimensional way that story can be told.
Yeah, and to that end, Becca just added something very important, I think, in the chat, in that there are regular B Corp policy collaboration calls that take place. Becca, do you want to talk a little bit about those? I'll put you on the spot.
I'm happy to. Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So B Lab US and Canada had in the past really focused a lot of our policy on more of the benefit corporation legislation. And in the recent 2 years, given also our theory of change, which really revolves around how businesses need to and should be focused on business practices surrounding racial equity, climate justice, and stakeholder governance, they really expanded that. So last year we brought on Grace Missauer, definitely mispronounced that last name. Again, I just got back from sabbatical, so everything's fresh. And she implemented last year bi-monthly policy calls. And you can join that and find other B Corp leaders that are also working on policy. And oftentimes it's another B Corp leader saying, hey, this is something that's really important to me. Is anyone else working on it? Or something that B Lab is helping to also lead. And Grace has also started in the US right now, and we're working with a consultant to also expand this into our Canada region with congressional fly-ins as well, to make sure that we're really starting to give our community the opportunity to engage and also work with one another on policy.
That's great. Thank you, Becca. I've been on a couple of those calls, and it's really, they're really engaging for sure. Kate.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, how you're a tiny company, how do you get started, right? Because there's this we want to start off the shelf. Everything that's on the shelf is a plastic jug. So I have to tell you, I do not know how much a plastic jug costs to put laundry detergent in. And somebody asked me that like last week in an interview, like, well, how much more are you paying for your cardboard packaging versus plastic? To be honest, I don't know. I don't look at those numbers. I think if you look at the traditions of innovation and creativity, a lot of times they come from restrictions. It comes from a design parameter saying, you know what, like, let's not consider this to be an option. And what can we do outside of that? And we have had great success. I can tell you, like, the products we sell are profitable. They are not remarkably different than the profitability you see in other CPG companies. The overall cost structure of our organization, and I think this is something that a lot of B Corps are more familiar with, sustainability does take investment. And you see that investment come back. It's a little bit hard to calculate the ROI if you look at the traditional investments we make. And paying a living wage is a great example, right? So a lot of B Corps are going to agree that paying competitively or paying at a minimum a living wage to frontline workers, or something that I know is really core to a lot of B Corps. It's core to us as a manufacturing company. That's not, that's not something we feel like we need to justify on a day-to-day basis. We just think it's the right thing to do, and we trust that that is going to come back to us as a company. It's an investment in sustainability and an investment in social equity. And I think that moving away from plastic, we can consider it an investment in the same way, where we simply don't, like, by and large, we don't really consider it an option to have these types of packaging that we know are harmful for the environment. And once we've accepted that, we just have to figure out the rest of the problem. And we're smart enough and we work really hard, and then we do it. So it's kind of maybe a slightly different way to think about it. But I don't think it's helpful. I don't personally find it helpful to say, like, oh, we have to pay X percentage more, because when you make it only about dollars, you're missing out on the return you get from the customer loyalty, from the people that appreciate that what you're doing as a brand, and the advancements that you're making.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Andrea, did you want to add to that?
Just real quick, I mean, there are a number of invisible costs that I think we've got so used to baking in that we failed to look at, right? So all of the cleanup, all of the costs that have for cleanup at the production side, which we almost never talk about, right? If there is a lot of chemical, we now are having to clean up PFAS across the Great Lakes region, right? That's coming from materials. Those forever type chemicals are used in binding and making plastic. When we're cleaning up when we're cleaning up petroleum or natural gas waste that's in the air or in the water, all of those costs, we as taxpayers often have a burden of dealing with. We also have, at the end of life, have to deal with the waste itself, which frankly, there's no solution for. And so on both ends, we're paying for those costs, and we're not considering them. If we think of what would happen if we reduce those costs by moving towards more sustainable options, we'd have all those resources to go to more healthy, positive things. And sometimes I think our focus is on the wrong syllable. And I think Kate's description of that is really important, right? And we let somebody else define for us what the parameters should be, and we count towards their priorities rather than saying, these are our ethos, these are our priorities, and we're going to count and move towards these. You all can help us all reset that ethical norm for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about externalities, and like, it's really almost a utilitarian approach of like, we're looking at this picture of all these plastics sitting around on the ground. Like, how do we pay for that as a society? Can we as a business look at the holistic view of where these products come from and where they end up and make a better choice?
Great, thanks. Joel?
One of the, I have a comment and then a follow-up question for others is, this conversation makes me think about the California legislation, which actually instituted a fee structure of a charge on producers. And so one of the policy approaches that I think is going to get more and more common is to actually increase the cost of plastic. And so the things like the containers or whatever the kind of the root sources of those plastic products that might be used by consumers are actually going to get more expensive in the same ways that gasoline will, because it's another form of making petroleum more expensive. I was thinking about Andrea's comments about reframing the conversation. I think you all as business owners, as marketers, have this great opportunity to help customers think about this differently. And we are one of the hurdles we run up against as a group trying to clean up the Great Lakes is that message of recycle and just throw things in the garbage can that really drives a lot of people's behavior. Like if you've got some waste, you just put it in the right spot and you did your job. And shifting that to thinking about, oh, wait a minute, maybe if I do this other thing, if I don't have that container in the first place, then that's the thing I should be doing. That to me is a big marketing question. And we've gotten so, like, the recycling mantra is so strong in the consumer's mind. And again, it's not, as I said in my comments, it's not to say that we shouldn't recycle, but it's sort of shifting the mindset to how do you market actually not consuming the thing at all as the first choice. And I think that's a really powerful opportunity for B Corps and others.
Yeah, completely agree. We do have one attendee question that I want to make sure we get to before we run out of time. Insu is asking what you suggest for eco-friendly alternatives to the plastic in our lives. It's a big question, but maybe one of you might have a thought on that for alternatives.
Just to build off of what Joel was saying, moving towards reuse is a really important piece, right? I often, when I give these talks, I have bulb jars, and I grew up using them as a kid, right? That was I'm old enough that 20-year window I was an adult during, right? Where most of all the plastic, I was saying that 20%, I mean, over the last 20 years, most of the plastic was created. Well, it's not like we didn't know how to move our coffee, or how to put coffee into a container and drink it, not in the coffee shop then. It's not like we didn't know how to, previous to that, we didn't know how to do things. We were able and using, and I think Kate's company shows that, we were able to use materials in the past, but we also can come up with really good, new, fun solutions. And I think trying to encourage us to look forward and think really as much as we possibly can about reuse. The secondhand products are just amazing. I love that corporations, the big ones like Patagonia, are teaching us how to fix things that we bought from them, right? And I love that some communities are full of like teaching folks how to fix their radio rather than throw it away, right? You know, fix the things rather than throw it away. Well, if you're producing something that is fixable and you promote how amazingly sturdy and brilliant it is, that's part of the brand that you're talking about. And I think that's also part of the sort of ethos that we can start to share with people, and you all as marketers can help us do that. But you know, as Kate was saying, sometimes restrictions can actually produce really wonderful solutions, and I think we just need to help folks see how amazing it can be for us to reframe our ideas, moving away from single use, especially single use plastics, and moving really directly towards reuse.
Great, thanks. We have one more question, probably time for one more question, and then we'll get we'll start to wrap things up here. It's a question for Kate. I know a lot of people have the perception that cleaning products that are more eco-friendly could be less effective than products that use chemicals. Do you have a strategy to challenge that perception?
Yeah, so at Meliora, our main strategy is that we don't launch products that don't work. That maybe that seems dumb, but I also think it's very smart. You know, once people try a product and it doesn't clean their dishes or it doesn't clean their stovetop, they're done. And then those are the people that shut down and never think again of trying an eco-friendly product. And I can't stand other people's disappointment. That's another thing to unpack, but like, yeah, so we just don't launch products until we are get the feedback that they are competitive with conventional. I know not every eco-friendly product does that, and that is a challenge for us certainly. And so we've gained a lot of consumer trust that way. And we find that once people have tried our products, they tend to be more convinced. And we also do rely a lot on, you know, third parties or word of mouth or people saying like, hey, this stain remover actually worked. I can't believe it. And that's what convinces a lot of people. So yeah, we have to be pretty careful about efficacy. Yeah, you've wasted all of the resources in a product if you're making a cleaning product that doesn't clean.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to ask one last quick thing. If we've covered a lot of ground from marketing to policy to you name it, I'm going to ask each of you to give one piece of advice to the B Corps in the audience on perhaps something that they could do or think about as a next step walking away from this webinar. Kate, I'll start with you.
Oh no, I'm on the spot. I actually think we've got a list of potential action items. So I would say, you know, start with that. I think I'll cheat a little, and I think we're putting together a bullet point list. So review that, consider that your homework, and just get started. A little action is better than no action. So let's get moving.
I love your setup. Thank you so much. Andrea, I'm going to ask the same question of you.
Know your power. You all are powerful. You are moving and changing not only consumer action, but your B Corp partners as well as your local communities. And your voice really matters. Really own that, fill in that space, take the power that you have and really amplify it. The more amplification of the amazing, brilliant work you all are doing, the better it is.
Great. Thanks. Joel, same question.
I'm just going to I heard this earlier. I think Andrea said something like this, but it really struck with me is, you know, I, of course, as a policy advocate, I love the idea of companies that use plastic and have to produce or consume some of it, going to decision makers and educating them on what's possible. And so if there are opportunities for you to do that with us or with others, you know, really that's so critical, because as several of us have said today, this problem seems overwhelming, and it is big. You know, it's big like climate change. But when you get businesses that are making money that go to decision makers and actually show how it's done, that makes a huge difference. And I'd welcome anybody who wants to, you know, participate in something like that. So thanks.
Thanks to all of you. Seriously, this is a great conversation. Really amazing amount of information covered and ground covered in all of this. And I really appreciate your time and expertise on all of this. Cleanups and recycling are great. They won't solve the problem. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Think about circular design practices. Kate talked a lot about that. They're useful for producers to design plastic out of their products and services. Connect your reduction efforts to protecting natural environments, but do so with honesty and transparency, and maybe get your own house in order first. Educate customers on reducing plastic at the source first, more important than recycling or waste reduction. And then plastic reduction policy is here, more is coming down the pipe. So get ahead of reduction goals. Public policy, as we have discussed many times, is critical to addressing this issue. So onward to what's next. Next month, we have a webinar 1 month from today on March 16th. Kendra, do you want to talk a little bit about it? And we'll drop a link in the chat if you want to register for it.
Got a link in there right now. We're going to be talking
Awesome.
about the
Thank
power of video to drive impact storytelling. It should be a great lunch and learn, and we'd love for you to join us.
Great, thanks so much. We're also looking for diverse voices to share best practices on these lunch and learns. As you saw, they're very useful. Would you mind putting a link in to the forum, Kendra, in the chat to get involved?
It is there as well. Please
awesome.
click in and share your information in the story or platform you would like to share with the B Corp community, as well as those who are interested in becoming B Corp certified.
Great. And if you are a B Corp, you can join the Beehive group, the US Canada B Corp Marketers Beehive group. I think we crested 300 plus members now at this point, which is great. And there's lots of conversations happening in there, and please do join and join the conversations. If not, you can sign up for emails at usca.bcorporation.net and get updated on the B Corp community. And finally, we've got a resource guide that we put together. It doesn't yet include links to the slide deck here and the video that we will be sharing out, but you can resource it, get it at the resource guide link that we'll put in the chat here. That includes some tips and takeaways from this conversation and action items that you can use. And I think that is it. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate everybody joining in on this conversation, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.